Hello, my name is KLytle, and I will be presenting on working animals in space research. So I'll start with the history. Early use of working animals in space research. So the use of animals in space research has a long history. It dates back to the 1940s when various animals such as fruit flies, mice, rats, dogs, and monkeys were sent into space by different countries for research purposes. um, the purposes of using animals in space research has evolved and changed over time, although there are some main purposes that have kind of prevailed throughout that. Those include testing the effects of spaceflight on living organisms, um, and then what I didn't say there would be to further human advancement, developing life support systems for humans in space, and studying the behavior and physiology of animals in space. All right. And so the first animal in space, almost, was Leica. And the first animals actually sent into space were fruit flies. And the fruit flies were actually launched in 1947 from New Mexico on a United States rocket. Um, but Leica was the first animal to orbit the Earth. And she was sent into orbit by the Soviet Union in 1957. She was a stray dog who was found on the streets of Moscow, allegedly, who was selected to be the occupant of the Sputnik 2, which was a Soviet spacecraft. And it was launched into space on November 3rd, 1957. The mission was not designed to return Leica safely to Earth, as the technology for a safe return was not yet developed at that time. So it was really a one-way trip for her. Her main duty as a working animal on that craft was to be the first living creature to orbit Earth and to further help researchers learn about the effects of spaceflight on living organisms. Um, and information received from the rocket is during the flight, her heart rate and her breathing rates were monitored, as were her responses to various stimuli. Unfortunately, during her, it's it's iffy, but it might have been her third orbit. It's There's no definite answer as to when the spacecraft malfunctioned, but in one of her consecutive orbits, the spacecraft's thermal control system malfunctioned, leading to her death just a few hours after the launch. And although she did die in such a short time after the launch, her mission provided valuable information about the effects of spaceflight on living organisms. Um, and since then, other mammals have been sent into space, including rabbits, other dogs, cats, monkeys, and then other animals as well, such as mice, rats, and even fish and insects. So, what has the research generated by these animals found? So, the results of animal missions have contributed significantly to our understanding of space physiology and have also helped to develop technologies and strategies to protect human beings in space. For example, animal research has provided insight into the effects of microgravity on bone and muscle density, and also the development of kind of like countermeasures to mitigate, the loss of bone and muscle in space. And additionally, animals have been used to test and validate life support systems for spaceflight. All right, and now we're going to look at an example of some findings. The article I chose to highlight here is called The Effects of Spaceflight on Innate Immune Function and Antioxidant Gene Expression. It's by Basai et al., and it was published by the Journal of Applied Physiology in 2009. And so the effects of spaceflight on innate immune function and antioxidant gene expression. So the study used mice to research immune function and gene expression. I pulled this table that really only talks about immune function, but this was one of the easier tables to analyze here. So I pulled this table 1, organ masses normalized to body mass and brain mass. And so in this table, the researchers found that spaceflight had a significant effect on organ masses in mice. The significant decreases observed were in the spleen, liver, and thymus. In the FLT group, which was the group of mice that was treated with the microgravity. And so there were significant decreases observed in that group compared to the GRD group, the ground group, which was the control group, which was treated to normal Earth gravity. It was not that group was not messed with anyway. And so overall, the study suggests that spaceflight can have significant effects on both organ masses and gene expression for mice. And although not, observed here in the table, the study concludes that their findings could have connotations relating to the gene expression of humans in space and their immune functions as well. So I thought that was very interesting. And now we'll move on to ethical concerns. So I kind of categorized it in 4 kind of main groups here. So the use of animals in space research also has, raised ethical concerns, particularly regarding animal welfare and kind of like the justification for using animals. And so we'll start with animal welfare. That concern is kind of like the potential harm and stress that animals in space research face. And then justification concerns can be described as whether or not using animals in human-centric space research is justified, as we're really just using animals as tools to further human advancement. And so the alternatives kind of concern is whether or not there are viable replacements to animal use that should be explored. And then transparency, which is the level of truthfulness and clarity that researchers are communicating and releasing to the public about their use of animals for space research. I think that's a really important one. And so I just kind of included a little example of what these differing viewpoints could look like. Here I have kind of like a spectrum with one end being pro animal use for space and against animal use for space research. And the white little text under each one, it's not like an all-encompassing thing. It's more of just an example of what these different stances could be. So take a second, I guess, and try and pinpoint where your own stance would fall on the spectrum, if you can. All right. So in terms of current regulations, the use of animals in space research is subject to ethical guidelines and regulations that are set by NASA and the ESA, which is the European Space Agency. Those are the big agencies. There's also various other ones. And these guidelines, the main purpose of these guidelines is to ensure that animal welfare is protected during space research. And also another main guideline is that the use of animals is minimized or avoided whenever possible. So that kind of connects it back to the, I'm not sure I can go back on here, but that connects back to the exploration of other options besides animal use. And there's also an ongoing research and development of alternative methods to further, refine and reduce or, theoretically replace all human use in space research, which I think is also very interesting. And here are my references and then my peer review side.